Hi, I'm Micah Halpern. Thank you for joining me today as I do some thinking out loud. Our first segment is called Background Briefing. The first thing I've been thinking about is that when it all happened around Purim time last year, we did not understand how deadly this novel virus would be. We couldn't know. We couldn't be blamed for not knowing. We didn't realize that eating together and singing and dancing together was the easiest way to transmit this deadly disease. But that was Purim. By Pesach, by Passover, we knew for sure. We were mourning the deaths of our dear family and friends. We were recovering from the viruses ourselves. 7 weeks later, Shavuos, COVID-19 was still raging. And on Rosh Hashanah, Yom Kippur, Sukkot, Simchat Torah, it rages still and continues. It's not what we wanted. It's not what we expected. But it is, as the saying goes, what it is. So why can't the Jewish world, the Haredi world in particular, accept this hard truth? Why do so many people think that they're different from everyone else? As Jews, we know how to abide by rules and regulations, Shabbat, Kashrut, 613 mitzvot, commandments, that we obey on a daily, weekly, monthly, yearly basis. How is it that people either don't realize or don't care that by flaunting the rules, by being imposed on us by medical professionals, they are risking their lives, the lives of the people about whom they care, and yes, even the lives of people whose names they do not know, but whose lives they have, because of their own selfish and self-serving needs and desires, altered forever. I'm angry, more than angry. I'm enraged. I'm also a little embarrassed.
He's giving you to selfish. You are our friends.
Yes.
De Blasio is not your friend.
Yes.
De Blasio is a Hitler and a Nazi.
My fellow Jews are rioting. They are burning protective masks, dissing social distancing, and fighting the police. And the whole world is watching. And it's been going on this entire pandemic. How can people not realize? People of the book, as we're called, rather than saving lives as we're instructed to do, they're causing the loss of lives. Weddings are celebrated, and then about 5 days later, parents and grandparents of brides and grooms are diagnosed positive. They may die. Tens, hundreds, thousands of people attend funerals of someone who dies from corona, and tens and hundreds become infected. Again, they may die. People said Shiva, not Zoom Shiva, real Shiva, where well-wishers enter the homes to share condolences, and the mourners end up sick and hospitalized. A grandmother contracts it from a grandchild. She's hospitalized. The uncle is admitted to the ICU. It's a deadly cycle. Being instructed to inconvenience ourselves in order to respect and honor the elderly and those at most risk should not be treated as a burden. It should be treated as a gift. When we have the ability to help save lives, why would people, our people, choose instead to engage in acts that will ultimately and inevitably take lives? Why? The Haredi community believes that they are being singled out, even persecuted in the United States and Israel, because they are different, because they stand out. They are right. They are being singled out, but not for those reasons. They have thrown the safety rules and recommendations out the proverbial window, and their corona numbers have skyrocketed. That's why. When the numbers of diagnosed coronavirus in Orlando, Florida, home of Disney, the happiest place in the world, have been going down and down until Sukkot came. And there has to be a reason. There, it skyrocketed. Maybe because Orlando was the destination of thousands of Jews from Haredi communities across the U.S. They did not see the correlation. Can they not just accept the truth? The riots I'm watching on television and social media is real. The violence is real. The logic is warped. Synagogues and stores and restaurants in certain communities are pretending to comply. They are posted large signs that read, closed, on their doors. And in smaller letters in Hebrew or Yiddish, they write, use the back door instead, as if the police don't know what's happening. The Haredi community might not be fluent in the art of Google Translate, but the police certainly are. And in the end, who are they hurting? Who are they fooling? More important, Who are they killing? The ultimate sin. Doctors and scientists still do not understand the virus, but there are some things we do understand. And they know that a small capsule groups saves lives. They know that wearing masks saves lives. They know that social distancing saves lives. They know the importance of hand washing. It saves lives. It's not rocket science, but it is science. Maybe, just maybe, if we all do our best to follow their advice, by next Purim, we will be able to sing and dance and dine and rejoice with no fear of spreading the virus. We also need to think about the positives in our world right now, and I've also been thinking about that too. In Berlin, on Tuesday, October 6th, Israeli Foreign Minister Gabi Ashkenazi met with his UAE counterpart, Foreign Minister Sheikh Abdallah bin Zayed Al Nahyan. These two representatives of countries once thought to be mortal eternal enemies were hosted by their German counterpart, Heiko Maas. The meeting was more than a cordial formality. It was free of tension and angst. And in what was to become and has become commonplace in the currents of the new world, this new world that we live in, hammering home the new relationships forged by countries once hostile to each other. The group visited Berlin's Holocaust Memorial. Gabi Ashkenazi is the son of Holocaust survivors, and in an extraordinary and unplanned quirk of fate, the visit took place on the anniversary of the Yom Kippur War in the Gregorian calendar. The Israeli Foreign Minister's speech was actually broadcast live on Egyptian TV. The world we live in is changing. It is rapidly changing. Not to realize and to appreciate the changes happening around us is an act of obstinance, self-indulgence, and denial. Gulf countries are normalizing relations with the Jewish state. The United States has moved the embassy from Tel Aviv to Jerusalem, designating the capital as Jerusalem. The Palestinians, once the darling cause of the Arab and Muslim world, is now being sidelined by the Arab and Muslim world. And peace between Israel and Egypt, which once seesawed from cool to cold and back, never ever reaching tepid, is now, diplomatically speaking, warm and friendly. Once Egypt's President al-Sisi took office, the relationship between Egyptian and Israeli leaders warmed up, and al-Sisi has welcomed the normalization of Gulf states with Israel as a very important step forward. Until now, the media and the masses in Egypt have been consistently cold and angry at anything related to Israel, even hateful. This broadcast of Israel's foreign minister on an Egyptian network called Extra signals a dramatic attitude change. In the Egyptian media, which regularly broadcasts shows describing Jewish blood libels, stories about Jews murdering Muslim children and using their blood to bake matzah. The world of the Middle East and its media have become a diplomatic barometer. Like in the West, if it's on the news, viewers believe it to be true. If a significant network or news source espouses a point of view, the public will embrace that point of view. For many years, the Arab media fostered an antagonistic attitude toward the West and toward Israel. But slowly and definitely, that model is changing. Al Arabiya is a Saudi-owned TV network based in Dubai. It is much more popular than the Arabic-speaking world of Al Jazeera, a network better known to American viewers and followers of the Middle East news. Think of it as ABC versus CBS or CBS versus NBC. In translation, Al Arabiya means the Arabic one. The network's detractors are so upset, so scandalized by Al Arabiya's coverage of the events involving Israel, they have taken to calling the network Al Yehudiya or Al Ibriya, which means either the Jewish one or the Hebrew one. The people often composed of uninformed Muslim Arab masses are lagging behind their leaders in making the transition from what was once their position to where they are now, in a better place, forging a better and more embracing world. Saudi Arabia's former intelligence chief, the ambassador to the United States, Prince Bandar bin Sultan bin Abdulaziz, is a living, breathing example of forward thinking. Prince Bandar, as he's called in the United States, is a veritable institution and has been in his role for decades in both positions. His finger has been on the pulse of everything, small and large, that's happening in the world, especially with the United States and Israel. Prince Bandar is simply not another appointee or ambassador. He is the grandson of the founder of the Saudi kingdom. To get a sense of his position and his importance, Prince Bandor was the kingdom's ambassador to Washington from 1983 to 2005. That's a whopping 22 years. He was so comfortable in the Oval Office of the president that there's a picture of him sitting on the desk of the president of the United States, looking down on a seated President Bush. As an interesting aside, Prince Bandor's daughter, Rima, is the current Saudi ambassador to the United States. Al Rabia conducted a three-part interview with Prince Bandar. The first episode aired on Monday, October 5th. The most significant element of the prince's interview was his critique of Palestinian leadership over the past few decades, and even in contrast to other large swaths of the Arab world, he called the criticism leveled by Palestinian Authority at the agreements that both the UAE and Bahrain have made with Israel a transgression and a reprehensible discourse.
وأتذكر بالمناسبة بس عشان المواطن السعودي يعرف أخلاقيات قيادته لما ينظر لأخلاقيات الشواذ هذول من القيادات الفلسطينية.
Prince Bandor said that the Palestinians and their backers always are on the wrong side, and yet he reminded them Saudi kings have supported Palestinians and their authority for decades. Despite the PA's errors, while Saudi Arabia may not be the next country to normalize relations with Israel, they're getting closer and closer. For decades, generations, millennia, relations between the Arab and Muslim world and the Jewish state was a living nightmare. Anyone who dared to forecast all these changes would have been called a dreamer. But sometimes dreams come true. Coming up next, points of view. Today, both columns are from the Times of Israel. They have a blog section, which is really their opinion section, and it's filled with columns like these. First up is by Carol Green Unger. It was published on October 10th, and it's entitled COVID-19 Hit My Orthodox Israeli Town Hard. Here's how we stop the spread, and then subtitled, Our rabbis, doctors, and local government officials are all on the same page, and everyone, men, women, even small children, wears a mask. Carol Green Unger is an Israeli writer who lives in Kiryat Yearim. This is how she begins. Lately, the media has been flooded with stories of Orthodox Jews who are derelict in following pandemic protocols. This sort of behavior runs contrary to the Torah values which command us to protect life above all else. In my home community of Kiryat Yearim, a small Haredi Orthodox town of 6,000, just 15 minutes outside of Jerusalem, we take COVID-19 seriously. Come for a walk. You'll see men, women, even small children wearing masks over their noses and mouths. In our town, COVID-19 hit us early and hard. Unger explains how the community stepped up and took it seriously. She writes, Back in March, we experienced an outbreak after a porn party attended by an overseas guest who had the virus. A few dozen residents got sick and thousands went into quarantine. No one died, but one woman, a much beloved old-timer, nearly lost her life. Thank God, after many months, she's almost completely recovered. For a brief moment, our sleepy town achieved public notoriety as the COVID capital of the Jewish state. Our local government dispatched a hazmat-suited crew to clean our streets and parks. They set up testing and contact tracing. They also embarked on a public relations drive to urge us to take this seriously. This is important because at first, Kiryat Yearim was in the news as the COVID capital of Israel, but their leadership decided to act to save lives. They sent out cars with loudspeakers, reminding people to be careful. Rabbis told people to take precautions, and they did. They took responsibility for their actions. Unger writes, This is a Sukkot like no other, but who says it was terrible? Our tradition teaches that this holiday is best spent at home in the Sukkah, in a three-walled structure built to resemble a heavenly hug. And our efforts to slow the spread of the virus seem to be helping. Press reports say that the number of cases in Israel is coming down. She concludes by writing, As I write these words, a man with a recording and a loudspeaker is making his way through town. Speaking sternly, he reminds us to stick to the rules, to remain part of a solution, not part of the problem. I hope you continue to listen. Next up is a column, also from the Times of Israel, by Paulette Wolf. As I mentioned, this also is published on October 11th. It's entitled, Why Don't We Comply with COVID-19 Rules? Paulette Wolf begins, It seems kind of silly to be talking about how difficult change is when we're in the midst of one of the most significant changes most of us have experienced in our lifetimes. As a driver of change in one of the largest global bureaucracies, otherwise known as the United Nations, I used to joke that the major change was replacing the industrial white walls with an off-white color. But COVID-19 is no laughing matter. Every country, every strata of society, regardless of religion, age, or political affiliations, have been ravaged by this plague. Social media debates as to which has been worse, the death toll or the economic devastation. I'm not an authority on these issues, so I won't weigh in on the discussion. But Wolf does offer us an example to try to understand this better. She writes, the answer to it all, she writes, the answer lies in one of the basic tenets of change management, which is certainly now beats uncertainty later. What I do mean by that, let me explain through the following example. You hop into a taxi and tell the driver that you're in a rush. If he gets you to your destination in 10 minutes, normally it would take 15, you'll give him an extra $20. What's the certainty? That if he speeds and arrives earlier than normal, he'll make more money. What's the uncertainty? Well, he could get a speeding ticket or suffer worse outcomes, such as a car accident in which someone gets hurt or worse. Even if nobody is injured, the accident could cause damage to one or both vehicles. But here's the key. Most people will think, this won't happen to me. It's why they can watch anti-smoking ad campaigns and continue to puff away. Other people may get cancer, but I won't. And even if I do, I'm sure it would happen way, way, way in the future. The cigarette I'm smoking, though, gives me immediate satisfaction. Certainty now beats uncertainty later. It's an important concept that helps change managers understand what motivates people to behave as they do. Wolf concludes by simply explaining that change is hard. She writes, what I discovered is that the methodology which I applied, whose effectiveness has been consistently proven by experts in the field, works successfully across all cultures and professional disciplines. At the end of the day, people share the same desires, needs, interests, and priorities. So no, I haven't been surprised that when society urges change, individuals revert to their familiar, comfortable, albeit risky habits. So the next time someone tells you that change is difficult, nod your head sagely and tell them, I know. Coming up, commentary through cartoons, where pictures tell the story. I want to show you 3 cartoons today. The first is entitled Insomnia from Season. It's drawn by Angel Boligan, actually Italian. A person is sitting in bed and cannot sleep, clearly contemplating the terrible situation that we have in the world with COVID. The person in bed looks like a ghost. Next up is a cartoon published on September 11th, and it describes how happy most of the world is about the Abraham Accords, but not everyone. Bibi and the Prince of the United Arab Emirates are on the dove. Below them, looking very happy, are the presidents of the United States and China. Who was upset? Erdogan of Turkey and the Iranian Grand Ayatollah, Khamenei. Last up is a cartoon making fun of now famous fly that landed on Vice President Pence's head during the VP debate. The fly says that I accidentally landed on Mike Pence's head during the debate and instantly became the most unifying, feel-good thing of 2020. Next thing I know, I'm leading in the polls. The reason why this is so funny is not just because the entire episode of The Fly and the discussion of The Fly was and is funny, but it also illustrates just how ridiculous some of the things are that occupy our time and conversation, especially on the networks. In a moment, more of my own perspective and a few predictions. A statue of a man who served as the mayor of Vienna in 1897 and 1910 was defaced in Vienna, and the word Schande was scrawled on the monument. Schande means shame on you in German. Ironically, it means shame on you in Yiddish also. The mayor was Karl Lueger, a racist. He was a role model for Hitler. And during his tenure as mayor, Vienna was one of the largest cities in the world with a population of 2 million people. Nowadays, debates about the appropriateness of statues is commonplace. In the United States, statues are erected to honor people now considered racist are regularly toppled and destroyed. Lueger was a racist. He was a self-declared racist. Writers and philosophers used Lueger as the model of a racist. A racist cult of character was grown around Lueger, not just when he was mayor, but even afterwards. But in 1926, After his death, Vienna erected a statue to honor Karl the Wager. It represented Vienna as it was then, and there is still an undertone of anti-Semitism in Vienna today. The statue of Karl the Wager has not been taken down for a reason. In Vienna, there are still many people who have positive feelings about the racist Karl the Wager. Charny has just finished their second album. She's an Israeli actress and singer of Persian Iranian descent. For this album, Liraz had Iranian women from Iran singing with her. She used encrypted chats and encrypted social media. She sent money back and forth to singers through third-party countries. She was petrified that they would be discovered and arrested. In an interview, Charny explains that, quote, technically it was very difficult. Emotionally, it was much, much more difficult. I felt night after night that I was doing a bad thing, and these people could be arrested, she said. In the end, Liraz Charny fulfilled her dream. She's a strong believer that the real problem in Iran is Iranian leadership, not Iranians. What a remarkable story. President Erdogan of Turkey addressed the opening session of his parliament and announced that Jerusalem was their city. That day, the Ottomans controlled Jerusalem for centuries. Erdogan said, in this city, which we had to leave in tears during the First World War, it is still possible to come across traces of Ottoman resistance. So Jerusalem is our city, a city from us. While it is true the Ottomans controlled Jerusalem from 1516 to 1917, that's a very long time, 400 years. And in the end, World War I, they were ousted by the British. It's hardly their city. Much of Erdogan's opening remarks were dedicated to the Palestinians. It was strangely eerie to read his words. His presentation sounded like a speech from 1980, not 2020. This is a new era. There are only two vocal rejectors of this new era, Iran and Turkey. Saudi Arabia has stepped up and come out distancing themselves from Erdogan and his politics. Saudis and their business leaders have actually called for a total boycott of Turkey. There are tensions in the region, and Turkey seems determined to stoke them. Erdogan feels that Turkey will be stronger because they are rejecting Israel and the United States. There will be short-term benefits, but in the end, it's a losing strategy. We've been thinking out loud about a lot today. Now that you know what I've been thinking, let me know what you're thinking. Email me at micah@jbstv.org. Tweet me at Micah Halpern. Tell me what you think. Before we end, let me leave you with one piquante piece of information. Did you know that the Talmud has a discussion of an insect, or a fly, or a gnat, or a mosquito landing on the head of the evil Roman Emperor Titus? The word used is itush, which in modern Hebrew means mosquito, but it probably meant gnat or fly. Titus was the son of Vespasian. He was extremely disrespectful to the Jews at every turn. He even took a prostitute into the temple and had sex with her while lying on Torah scrolls. Once he was on a ship, and the waves were overwhelming. He spoke to God directly and said, "You are confronting me on the water. You always use water, such as Noah and the flood, the Egyptians and the Red Sea. Confront me on dry land." God responded, "I'll confront you with a tiny combatant." So on dry land, God sent a gnat that entered Titus's nose, and the gnat started to eat his brain. The gnat gnawed at Titus's brain for 7 years until his death. His only relief was when he stood next to an ironsmith who was smelting and pounding away, distracting him from this agony. After Titus died, the Romans opened his brain and found the gnat had grown to an enormous size. The Talmud in Gittin records different sizes, even to the size of a bird. It also says that its claws were metal and beak were gold. Thank you for thinking out loud with me, Micah Halpern. Let's think out loud again next week on JBS.